And a blessed good day to you. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. Greetings on behalf of His Excellency, Reverend Dr. Ferdinand Nicholls, and all the House of Freedom Ministries partners and friends here in beautiful Barbados. It's a pleasure and honor to connect with you from here on our beautiful Caribbean island of Barbados. I am Pastor Antonio Christie, and it's always a privilege to share God's word with you because here at House of Freedom Ministries, Barbados, we partner with Holy Spirit to equip and empower you to be free to have life and to have that life so much more abundantly. So just take a moment right now to like, follow, or subscribe, whether you're here on Facebook or on YouTube. And you can also click that notification bell right below to make sure you are immediately notified when we are sharing something with you as we walk, fellowship, and grow in the way together. So let's dive into today's word, the King's Mother. That is the title of today's message, and I am so excited to share this word with you today. Just 2 days ago, on the 8th of March, we celebrated International Women's Day, and today we're going to look at a woman whose story might not be so well known to us. But let's start. Let's dive right in. So let's start in Matthew chapter 1. We're going to go from verse 1 to verse 6, and we're going to go into the King James Version today. And of course, as you know, we're going to probably touch the Amplified Version just to make sure we bring some clarity and we expand a bit on the word as we go forward, right? So Matthew chapter 1, verses 1 to 6 from the King James Version. And it's going to be there up on your screen so we can read this together. The book of the generation of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham begat Isaac, Isaac begat Jacob, and Jacob begat Judas and his brethren. And Judah begat Phares and Zara of Tamar, and Phares begat Ezra, and Ezra begat Aram, and Aram begat Aminadab, and Aminadab begat Nason, and Nason begat Salmon, and Salmon begat Boaz of Rahab, and Boaz begat Obed of Ruth, and Obed begat Jesse, and Jesse begat David the king, and David the king begat Solomon of her that had been the wife of Uriah. All right, so now let's look at that from the Amplified Version. It reads a little easier in the Amplified Version, right? So the book of the ancestry or genealogy of Jesus Christ, the Messiah, the anointed, the son descendant of David, the son descendant of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers, Judah the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar, Perez the father of Hezron, Hezron the father of Aram, Aram the father of Aminadab, Aminadab the father of Nahshon, Nahshon the father of Salmon, Salmon the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab, Boaz the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth, Obed the father of Jesse, Jesse the father of King David, King David the father of Solomon, whose mother had been the wife of Uriah. Now we read Matthew chapter 1 and we find that Matthew is highlighting Jesus' genealogy. And in doing so, what is somewhat unusual is the mention of some females in general, but also which females are actually listed. First, in verse 3, we have Tamar, whose story began in Genesis chapter 38. Tamar is not even a wife like Sarah was to Abraham, or Rebecca to Isaac, or Leah was to Jacob. Even though Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are mentioned in verse 2, their wives are not. But we have Tamar, who was actually the daughter-in-law of Judah, but tricked him into sleeping with her and gave birth to Perez, who becomes a part of the genealogy of Christ, the genealogy of Jesus. The next female we have mentioned in Matthew, are Rahab in verse 5, and then Ruth also in verse 5. Remember, we first encounter Rahab as a harlot when Joshua sends out the two spies into Jericho in the book of Joshua, chapter 2. And Rahab chooses the God of the Israelites over her own people, the Canaanites. And then in verse 5, we also have Ruth, probably the most well known of the women mentioned here by Matthew so far, the daughter in law who pledges total loyalty even unto God. This is Ruth who followed Naomi and said, "Your people shall be my people, and your God shall be my God." Those famous words, that Ruth. So then we come upon an unnamed but identified woman, a mother. Verse 6. We're going to read verse 6 from the Amplified Version. So verse 6 from Matthew chapter 1 from the Amplified Version reads, Jesse, the father of King David, the father of Solomon, whose mother had been the wife of Uriah. This is the story of Bathsheba, the king's mother. Now, when we go all the way back to Samuel, so 2 Samuel chapter 11, you find this story involving Bathsheba. Now, let's pay close attention here as we look at this story, this history, or as a friend of mine would say, her story. I will be highlighting some things as we read together. So let's go pay close attention. Let's go there. 2 Samuel chapter 11. We're going to go from the King James Version. Right? You ready? All right, let's read together. And it came to pass after the year was expired, at the time when kings go forth to battle, that David sent Joab and his servants with him, and all Israel, and they destroyed the children of Ammon and besieged Rabbah. And David tarried still at Jerusalem. And it came to pass in an eventide that David arose from his bed and walked upon the roof of the king's house. And let's pause here. Let's pause here for a second. So let's note what they're not. Let's read what the story is saying here. And it, 2 Samuel 11, the writer is careful to indicate that after the year was expired and the time when kings go forth to battle, to highlight the fact that David or kings in general would have usually been in battle at this time, in this season. This was the time when kings go forth to battle. However, David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel. That is in reference specifically to the soldiers that fought under Joab, but not just that, but the entire army of Israel was sent forth to do battle, right? And they destroyed the children of Ammon and besieged Rabbah. Again, another noteworthy moment where with victory, you would see news of victory being sent to the king, and he would come and start his authority on this victory. But then it says here, but David tarried still at Jerusalem. The writer is careful to indicate that David was not where he was supposed to be. And we go on in verse 2. And it came to pass in an eventide that David arose from his bed and walked upon the roof of the king's house. Now I have searched, and maybe you can search for me, with me, find some other reference, but I find no other reference of any other king or even this same king going on the king's house on the roof before this or after this. So David is the one who gets up in the evening from his bed, right? He's in his bed till evening time. He's not in battle. He should be. He's not celebrating or leading their celebration whereby when they just had a victory. He's still in Jerusalem, sleeping in bed late, gets up from his bed and goes, of all places, on the top of his roof, all right, the rooftop of the king's house, and he walks. And we continue in verse 2. And from the roof, he saw a woman washing herself. and the woman was very beautiful to look upon. Notice we're into the second verse here, and we don't have this woman's names as yet. Verse 3. And David sent and inquired after the woman, and one said, is not this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? And David sent messengers and took her, and she came in unto him, and he lay with her, for she was purified from her uncleanness, and she returned unto her house. Here now we see in verse 3, she is mentioned by name just to identify who she is, but also with the framework that she is the daughter of Eliam and the wife of Uriah. Verse 5. And the woman conceived and sent and told David and said, I am with child. And David sent to Joab, saying, send me Uriah the Hittite. And Joab sent Uriah to David. And when Uriah was come unto him, David demanded of him how Joab did, and how the people did, and how the war prospered. And David said to Uriah, go down to thy house and wash thy feet. And Uriah departed out of the king's house, and there followed him a mess of meat from the king. So David, hearing that Bathsheba is pregnant, communicates with Joab and says, hey, send Uriah to me. Send Uriah the Hittite. And Uriah the Hittite comes. Uriah the Hittite comes in unto David, the king, before the king. David asks him, how's the battle? How are things going with Joab? How was the victory? You enjoyed that victory there. How are things going? And then says, okay, David, thanks for that update. Okay, you know what? Go home, wash your feet, go home. You just send him back to the battle. He says, all right, you're right, you go home. And you know what? I'm going to send a mess of meat behind you. I'm going to send a feast. I'm going to send food with you to your house. So you go home. That's what it says in verse 8. And David said to Uriah, go down to thy house and wash thy feet. And Uriah departed out of the king's house, and there followed him a mess of meat from the king. Verse 9, but Uriah slept at the door of the king's house with all the servants of his lord, and went not down to his house. And when they had told David, saying, Uriah went not down unto his house, David said unto Uriah, camest thou not from thy journey? Why then did thou not go down unto thine house? And Uriah said unto David, the ark and Israel and Judah abide in tents, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are encamped in the open fields. Shall I then go into mine house to eat and to drink and to lie with my wife? As thou livest, and as thy soul liveth, I will not do this thing. So David is asking Uriah, so why didn't I send you home? Why didn't you go home? Were you tired from your journey? And Uriah says, hey, the ark of the covenant, the presence of God, the Israel, Judah, we are at war. The soldiers, my brothers that I fight side by side with, some of that I would have died while I was here with you. They're out there sleeping in tents. And my leader, Joab, the head of the army, is out there, fighting and sleeping in tents. Right? And they're encamped about in the open fields. How can I go home and eat and drink and be with my wife? As long as you are alive, like on your life, I will not do this. This is Uriah's response to David. What does David do in verse 12? And David said to Uriah, tarry here today also, and tomorrow I will let thee depart. So Uriah abode in Jerusalem that day and the morrow. And when David had called him, he did eat and drink before him, and he made him drunk. And at even he went out to lie on his bed with the servants of his Lord, but went not down to his house. And it came to pass in the morning that David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah. So what just happened? What just happened is that David realizing this man did not go home. What I'm going to do, I'm going to keep him here in Jerusalem longer. And while he's here, I'm going to make him eat and drink at my table. He's going to come before me and we're going to eat and drink and I'm going to make him drunk. And he did that. They were made him drunk and with the intention of sending him home. But again, Uriah, as it says in verse 13, he went out to lie on his bed with the servants of his Lord. He went back to the same bed he slept on before, just at the door of the house. And it says, but went not down to his own house. Right? So, and then we have now in verse 14, David writing a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of. And verse 15 reads, and he wrote in the letter saying, set ye Uriah in the forefront of the hottest battle, and retire ye from him, that he may be smitten and die. And it came to pass when Joab observed the city that he assigned Uriah unto a place where he knew that valiant men were. And the men of the city went out and fought with Joab. And there fell some of the people of the service of David, and Uriah the Hittite died also. So David writes this letter to the head of the army, Joab, faithful servant, head of the army, Joab, and instructs Joab, and Joab becomes complicit in this plot to kill Uriah. He instructs Joab, takes Uriah, place him in the hottest part of the battle, right? And then pull back and leave him out there to die. Make sure he dies in battle. And Joab does that. Verse 18. Then Joab sent and told David all the things concerning the war, and charged the messenger, saying, why, when thou hast made an end of telling the matters of the war unto the king, and if so be that the king's wrath arise, and he say unto thee, wherefore approach ye so nigh unto the city when you did fight? Knew ye not that they would shoot from the wall? Who smote Abimelech, the son of Jerubbabel, and did not a woman cast a piece of milestone upon him from the wall, that he died in Thebez? Why went ye nigh the wall? Then say thou, thy servant Uriah the Hittite is also dead. So what is Joab issuing? Joab is saying, all right, I'm going to send you messenger back to the king to report everything that has happened in detail. And if he gets vexed, Joab is saying, hey, messenger, if King David gets vexed about the news, about what happened when we went to that place that was so heated, where it was guaranteed that men would die, and he makes reference to, when the last time we went so close to the wall and someone threw down a milestone and killed one of the guys in that previous battle, and he gets vexed, then just remind him and mention that thy servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. So remind him that this was your plan, and I've executed, and he is dead just as you asked. Right? Obviously, this messenger might not have known the details prior to Joab telling him what to say, but Joab was communicating to David in secret. I've done exactly what you told me to do, right? And he is dead. So verse 22. So the messenger went and came and showed David all that Joab had sent for him for. And the messenger said unto David, surely the men prevailed against us and came out unto us into the field, and we were upon them even unto the entering of the gate. And the shooters shot from off the wall upon thy servants, and some of the king's servants be dead. And thy servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. So we see here in verse 24 that the messenger is, I don't know if he even waited for David to get upset, but he is careful to make sure he mentions and thy servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. Verse 25. Then David said unto the messenger, thus shalt thou say unto Joab, let not this thing displease thee, for the sword devoureth one as well as another. Make thy battle more strong against the city, and overthrow it, and encourage thou him. And when the wife of Uriah heard that Uriah, her husband, was dead, she mourned for her husband. And when the mourning was past, David sent and fetched her to his house, and she became his wife and bare him a son. But the thing that David had done displeased the Lord. Now, this is where we first hear any glimpse or have any understanding of this person, this woman that is mentioned in Matthew chapter 1, verse 6 of Bathsheba. And note that in this entire chapter, in this story of this plot, this deep plot that involves the king and the head of the army and a war and a messenger, Bathsheba's name is only mentioned once. For the rest of the chapter, she is referred to as she or her or the wife of Uriah. Even in verse 26, even when she is in a place of mourning, and when the wife of Uriah heard that Uriah, her husband, was dead, she mourned for her husband. Her name is not even highlighted. The author is purposefully highlighting the wife of Uriah, and not necessarily calling her wife. Right? So let's look at what Bathsheba is going through. Let's look at what Bathsheba is going through. She is the daughter of Eliam. Now, when you do a little digging into who Eliam, Eliam, who he was also in the army of Israel, and not just anyone, but a prominent figure in the head and in the army. He was a leader, an officer in the army, right? So she was the daughter of a well-known soldier, someone of recognition, right? And then she was married to a soldier, right? She was married to a soldier. Where was she when David saw her? Now, sometimes, a lot of us in past may have misread or misremember or thought to ourselves that, somehow Bathsheba is to blame. Bathsheba shouldn't have been where she was, shouldn't have been doing what she was doing. How dare she be seen while she was bathing? But let's understand and read what we have. What we have is the writer specifically highlighting that David was not where he was supposed to be. And it's emphasized he should have been in battle. And then even so, when there was a besieged, right? When they destroyed the children of Ammon and besieged Rabbah, he should have still been there, but he tarried in Jerusalem. And then not only that, he slept into the evening. So he was not where he was supposed to be, and he was lazy. Maybe, I don't know, maybe people might say he was depressed or whatever. And then he went on the roof of the king's house. It doesn't say why, but he was there. And he is the one that saw her. He is the one that saw her. Let's also look at the other details that we may not have noticed while reading this the first time. In verse 4, it says, and David sent messengers and took her, and she came in unto him, and he lay with her. And here's the part that we may miss, for she was purified from her uncleanness, and she returned unto her house. What does that mean, that she was purified from her uncleanness? We must note that when she was spotted, she was bathing. Now, when we look at and we understand, that term of being purified from uncleanness, we must look at Leviticus chapter 15. Now, we're not going to look at it right now, but when you have the time, you must read through Leviticus chapter 15, because Leviticus chapter 15 talks about the ritual process of cleansing. Now, this is a reference. This is back in Moses' day when the laws were being detailed, the Levitical law was being detailed. And one of the things that became Levitical law, even unto sometimes, I think even currently, it is still somewhat law. It maybe not enforced the same way in 2024, but the law of the land, especially as David, when David was king, was that a woman, when she had that issue of blood that we today refer to as her period, she had to be separated from everybody because she was deemed as being unclean. She was deemed as being unclean. And anyone that touched her was deemed as being unclean. Or anything that she touched was deemed as being unclean. So what a female, while having her period, as soon as her period began, the responsibility, she had a responsibility to go to a separate place apart from the children of Israel, right? A designated location, right? A designated location for that period of time. The period of time was a minimum of 7 days. If it tarried, then it had to be 14 days. All of this is detailed in Leviticus chapter 15, right? As also as well as it relates to childbirth. If she had just given birth to a child, and then there's that process now of the passing of what we would term today the afterbirth, what they would have also highlighted as the issue of blood again. For that period, again, she was deemed as being unclean and had to be set apart, maybe a little differently than with the period, but set apart for a period of at least 7 days, if not 14 days. For some reason, I think it's 14 days. I don't remember it right now, right? But we can go on. We can find the details of that in Leviticus chapter 15. Now, so we see this married woman, right? This married woman who would have been extremely familiar with the Levitical law. She was not just anybody. She was the daughter of a prominent soldier who is named, and she was married to a current soldier, and both of them would have been out to war. And she was still been taking the responsibility to go through that process of cleansing. That process of cleansing, right? Because that's what it says in verse 4. She was purified from her uncleanness. Yeah. So that bath was not just a regular bath. That was a one of those cleansing baths of that process of clean. So she was doing exactly what she was supposed to be doing, and she was doing it where she was supposed to be doing. Because a part of that process of being cleansed, of being moving from being unclean to being clean, is that she had to present herself with some gifts for sacrifice to the priest before she was declared clean again. Before she was declared clean again. So David's messengers would not have even touched her unless that process had been complete. Because they're also, according to the Levitical law, you can check this in Leviticus 15, they also would have been declared unclean and would have had to go and wash immediately and remain secluded until that night passed. So they couldn't have returned, they couldn't have gone and touched her or returned to the king, right? Because everything that they would have touched also would have become unclean, right? And the punishment for breaking this Levitical law, I don't remember the Hebrew term right off the top of my head, but it was a severe punishment. You went on to death. You could not approach the temple. You cannot go and touch the things that were used in the process of the temple, right? Or in terms of any of the processes of repentance or sacrifice and offers. And there were many different processes, religious worship processes that the children of Israel had to take part in. And she could not do that because she was unclean. Anyone that touched her couldn't do that until they became clean, and that process required them to become immediately washed and it waiting for the next day. So understand what is happening here in verse 2, 3, and 4. Right. Also note that David is the one who inquired about She had no idea. There's nothing to suggest she had any idea. David sent messengers and took her. When the king sends messengers to your door, you go. You go. He is the king. And and then why was she persistent? She knew her father was at war. She knew her husband was at war. She knew there was a war going on. Maybe she thought to herself, something's happened to my husband. Something's happened to my father. My father being a prominent soldier. Maybe the king wants to tell me directly, hey, your dad has died in battle. Maybe. Yeah. So she goes, right? She goes and she comes in unto him, as it says in verse 4, and he lays with her. And he lays with her. Now, it doesn't say here that she was raped, right? And I know a lot of us are looking to see, are looking to try to figure out, was she willing? Was she unwilling? Was she raped? What happened in that conversation? What happened in that room? But I must highlight for us. I must highlight for us and take us back to these times. So we need to remember that in Old Testament times, there wasn't as much nuance surrounding the term rape as there is today. In fact, according to the law of Moses, rape was only rape if the victim was a virgin, if the victim was forced down, and if the victim vocally protested. Let me say that again. Rape was, according to the law of Moses, same Levitical, or you'll find this, we're going to find this, look at this in Deuteronomy in a moment, right? It was only rape if the victim was a virgin, as in not married, never had, consensual sex before, right? If they were a virgin, if they were forced down, and if they vocally protested. Only then was it considered rape. So, but let's look at that in detail so that we don't misunderstand. So you don't just take my word for it. Let's look at that. Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 23 to 29. I'm going to ask the team to put it up on the screen for us. Deuteronomy 22, verse 23 to 29. We're going to go for the King James Version. And we may go over to the Amplified. I'm just looking at the time, but so we probably just stick to the King James Version. Right? So, verse 23. If a damsel that is a virgin be betrothed unto an husband, and a man find her in the city and lie with her, then ye shall bring them both out unto the gate of that city, and ye shall stone them with stones that they die. The damsel, because she cried not, being in the city, and the man, because he hath humbled his neighbor's wife. So thou shalt put away evil from among you. So those first two verses, I know some of us are screaming like, what? But this was the reality that they lived. This was the reality that the women of these days, of those days, especially even as David was king, this is the reality that they lived in. Where a damsel that is a virgin betrothed, and in those days being betrothed was equivalent pretty much to being married, right? But betrothed unto a husband, all right? And a man finds her, so she's not, married yet, because she's still a virgin. She hasn't consummated the marriage, but she's gone through the process of being betrothed unto a husband. And a man finds her and lies with her, all right? Verse 24 saying, then you shall bring them both out unto the gate of that city, and you shall stone them with stones that they died. The damsel, because she cried not. So if she didn't cry out, she's, what I'm saying? If there was no vocal expression of resistance, no vocal protest during the act, right? Because she cried not, being in the city. That's where the act happened, right? And then the man, because he humbled his neighbor's wife, so that shall put away even from all. Okay, so let's look even further. Verse 25. Verse 25. But if a man find a betrothed damsel in the field, and the man force her, right? First, no, one condition, and lie with her, then the man only that lay with her shall die. So if those conditions are met, now she's forced now, right? In the field now, right? So even if she cried out, she's often feel like, who cares? But if it's forced, right, then the man only that lay with her shall die, right? Verse 26, but unto the damsel thou shalt do nothing. There is in the damsel no sin worthy of death, for as when a man rises against his neighbor and slay him, even so is this matter. So it's being compared to murder as well, right? But note as well too, this is a damsel again, another term in terms of in terms of or virgin, right? So this is someone who's unmarried again, right? So therefore, not having had sex, consensual sex before this, right? Verse 27, for he found her in the field, and the betrothed damsel cried, and there was none to save her, right? Again, highlighting that she vocally protested, but there was no one to save her. Verse 28, and if a man finds a damsel that is a virgin, which is not betrothed, and lay hold on her, and lie with her, and they be found. So again, reiterating the story above, and they're found, right? It's found out. Then the man that lay with her shall give unto the damsel's father 50 shekels of silver, and she shall be his wife, because he have humbled humbled her. He may not put her away all his days. So if it's the same scenario, but she's not betrothed, that it says in verse 28, right? If a man finds a damsel that is a virgin, which is not betrothed, so she's not betrothed, right? Uh, and she's raped, he lays hold of her and lays with her, and they be found, whether lays hold of her, raped or not, then all it is that he had to do is give 50 shekels of silver, and she shall be his wife, because he have humbled her. He may not put her away all his days. So this is the reality that Bathsheba walks into as she is taken by David's method, having just gone through the ritual purification process of becoming clean again after not being clean, right? And she's brought before not just the man, but brought before the king. Brought before the king, because in those days, again, women were completely subject to the king's will. Completely subject to the king's will. And she was not a virgin. She was not a damsel. She was a married woman. She did not fit the prerequisite according to the Levitical law or the law of Moses for rape, for what we would term rape today. The word rape is not exactly there either, but she does not fall into that category. She does not fall into that category. And they're not found. It's not found out, Uriah is alive. It's not as exposed as yet. Right? So this is what happens to Bathsheba. This is what happens to Bathsheba. And as we look further into the story of Second Samuel, right? I was looking at the story in Second Samuel. We go forward to chapter 12. We're not gonna, as I'm looking at time, we go to look, and we go forward in chapter 12. We see that God reveals this to the prophet, and Nathan comes in, and for me, this is one of the most interesting moments that I read in terms of a prophet and a king. But Nathan comes in and he exposes David's sin. He exposes what David did, taking the wife of Uriah, sleeping with the wife of Uriah, killing Uriah, and then taking his wife, Uriah's wife, after the time of mourning, into him as his wife, and she has given birth to a son. And part of that confrontation, part of that judgment that Nathan says and declares in that moment is that child will die. That child will die. And again, we have to make sure we look back at the Levitical law, Leviticus chapter 20, verse 21. Leviticus chapter 20, verse 21. Just pop that up on the screen for me there if you have a chance. Leviticus chapter 20, verse 21. I believe this is the King James version I have here, right? If a man takes his brother's wife, It is hated. It is a hated and unclean thing. He has uncovered his brother's nakedness. They will be childless. So the judgment, the Levitical law declares it is hated and unclean. He's uncovered his brother's nakedness after taking his brother's wife, and they will be childless. So what Nathan, the prophet Nathan, comes and declares God has said it's not an unheard of judgment. It is not an uh there's no prerequisite. There's nothing to fall back on to say, hey, something like this has happened before. It is there in Leviticus chapter 20, verse 21, where that is a part of after you've been caught sleeping with your brother's wife, we're dealing with you now, you know. Obviously this will come into play if she becomes pregnant. The child cannot be his. They will be childless. Right? There's some translations that suggest that it's not that the child is killed, but that the child is taken away and it's not legally theirs. Right? But either way, it says they will be childless. In this case, the child dies. In this case, the child dies. We see David go into a period of mourning, which is at least 7 days. I would put it to you that I believe it would have been 14 days, simply because of what happens at the end of this period of mourning, right? And a time when that Nathan, the prophet Nathan, does come to David, I put it at 14 days. But either way, after the period of mourning, the child, after the period of him praying, the child dies. The child dies. And then we read in 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 24 and 25. The only other time in Samuel, in this story here, that we pull from Samuel that Bathsheba's name is mentioned, is right here. 2 Samuel 12, verse 24 and 25. And David comforted Bathsheba, his wife, and went in unto her. This is right after, because in verse 23, he is saying, uh, you know, I can only go to my son. He can't go to me. He's dead. He's gone. And the next verse 24. And David comforted Bathsheba, his wife, and went in unto her and lay with her. And she bare a son, and he called his name Solomon. And the Lord loved him. Verse 25. And he sent by the hand of Nathan the prophet, and he called his name Jedidiah, because of the Lord. All right. And when we look at the Amplified version, verse 25, he sent a message by the hand of Nathan the prophet, and Nathan called the boy's special name Jedidiah, beloved of the Lord, because the Lord loved the child. So what's happening here? What's happening here is that we see David's heart. David is immediately repentant after being confronted by Nathan. He goes into the spirit of fasting, repentance, and prayer, hoping and saying, in his mind, you know what? God could probably still spare this child. And he goes into that, and that is completed as he overhears his servants whispering and perceives that they're whispering about that his child has actually died. He asks, has he died? They said, yes, the child has died. And David gets up immediately, goes to eat, and they question, how can you do this? Right? But David has that repentant heart. Remember, David is still the one who is named as a man after my own heart. God himself identified David as that person. It's not because David was sinless. No, he was an adulterer, a womanizer, a murderer. He abused every power in his office. Yeah. He is the one that initiated that behavior. He's the one that wasn't where he was supposed to be. But yet he repented. He repented to the place where God forgave him, because we here now see in verse 24 that she bore a son. And not only did she bear a son, but that son that she gave birth to was Solomon. Solomon, who became the king that was greater than David. as it is declared in First Chronicles 28:29, where David comes and he, names Solomon king and declares the promise of God to him that he wouldn't build the house of God, but that his son Solomon will build the house of God. And all the people and the priests and they prayed and credit to God that Solomon will be, greater than David, and that his house will be greater than David. And all of that is, you can go and you can read that in in First Chronicles 28, verse 29. The story also is referenced in First Kings 1 and 2, how Solomon was placed on the throne. Yeah. So that is the unnamed individual who is only referenced in the genealogy of Christ in Matthew 1, verse 6. Now, why did I choose to speak about Bathsheba? Because I believe that it is important that we, especially to our females, to our women out there in this time, as we celebrated them on Friday, and we continue to celebrate them as good husbands and sons and fathers and brothers, and we celebrate them to make sure that you understand that even if your name is unknown, even if you have been abused and manipulated, even if your family has been targeted and killed, even then, you can still heal. And not only can you heal, you can still prosper. And not only can you prosper, but you can have influence in the earth for generations. Because let's not forget that Solomon was the one that wrote Proverbs 1, Proverbs 2, Proverbs 3, all the way down to one of our favorite verses, our favorite chapters, Proverbs chapter 31. Solomon was the one who wrote that. The son of Bathsheba. We may not remember her name when we come to it in Matthew chapter 1, verse 6. It may not be mentioned there, but we can never take away the fact that she was the mother of Solomon. Even in Solomon's Proverbs chapter 31, as he begins talking about the King Lemuel, who a lot of scholars believe was Solomon himself, speaking about himself, representing himself under a different name, right? Saying that this proverb was written by his mother. So I put it to you. I want to make sure that all the women hear me today. That all the women hear me today. Just like Bathsheba, if your story is anything like Bathsheba's, know that God still sees you. God still has a plan for you. God will still use you, and your influence will still leave a mark to be remembered. Who knows? Maybe your name might not be remembered, but you would be the one who has the responsibility of bringing Solomon into the world, of raising Solomon and teaching Solomon and inspiring Solomon, even as a tender age. I was having a conversation with a brother of mine the other day, and he was talking about, Antonio, you'll be remembered for this and this and this, you know? And when I heard him say, I realized that he was kind of struggling to think about how he would be remembered. But I made sure to correct him and let him know, hey, you will be remembered. And I also highlighted the fact that, all of us remember names like Billy Graham. You might remember even Benny Hinn. You might remember Smith Wigglesworth. But even then, someone led Billy Graham to Christ. Someone led Smith Wigglesworth. Someone influenced Benny Hinn. Someone influenced even His Excellency Reverend Dr. Ferdinand Nicholls. Someone influenced them to put them on a trajectory for greatness. That can be you. You can be that person. I encourage you today, no matter where you find yourself, known or unknown, forgotten, abused, misused, no matter what happens, no matter how your story starts, no matter where your story is today, your story can turn around and you can be known as the mother of the king. So thank you once again for spending this time with us here at House of Freedom Ministries Barbados. Remember to connect with us via our comments in the chat here, or messages on Facebook, or even send us an email via our email address, hofbdos1997@gmail.com. Thank you so much for liking, sharing, following, subscribing, clicking below, and I'm already excited about sharing with you the next time. God bless you. Bye bye.